Columbus, Ohio is the largest city in the developed world with zero rail-based public transit. That means no subway, no trams, and no commuter rail. It's also one of the fastest growing cities in the Midwest. The metro area is expected to add 1 million residents by 2050. So in this video, I'm going to give them what they need. Using Subway Builder, I'm going to design and simulate a full rail system for Columbus based on real job centers, real data, and real transit plans to answer some questions like, where should the first lines go? Can freight corridors be reused? And most importantly, would anyone actually ride it? This is the third of 3 community challenges, and I have 125 in-game days to build a system that Columbus never did. Let's see what happens. First, we need to understand why Columbus doesn't currently have any rail transit, because it's not like the city never had it. Streetcars used to run all over Columbus, and like most American cities, they were ripped out by the 1950s as the city shifted towards cars and highways. Intercity rail lasted a bit longer. Amtrak served Columbus until 1977 when the National Limited was discontinued. Since then, the city has had zero passenger rail service. So for almost 50 years, Columbus has been bus only. And today, transit is handled entirely by COTA, which runs a decent bus network, but frequency can be limited, especially outside peak corridors. In a fast-growing, increasingly spread out metro area, that makes it hard for transit to compete with driving. There have been attempts to change that. The biggest current effort is Link US, a set of bus rapid transit corridors planned for the Northwest, East Main, and West Broad. These projects will create dedicated lanes and, importantly, secure right-of-way that could eventually support rail in the future. There's also momentum at the state level to bring Amtrak back, with proposals to restore passenger rail service to Columbus by 2035. So the city isn't ignoring transit, but as right now, there's still no rail, which makes this the perfect blank slate. Let's look at these BRT plans I've mentioned before. First, we have the East Main Street BRT. This is proposing 17 BRT stations, and for most of the route, a dedicated bus lane. This is traveling from Reynoldsburg, all the way on the right, into downtown, stopping at the Arena District. Now, a BRT is going to have a lot more stops than a light rail or a heavy rail would. And to keep up speeds, we're going to need to cut back some of these stations. So my plan is to target any notable locations, as well as keeping an eye on in-game data to see where people are living and working. And the next one is the West Broad Street. Now this one goes all the way from little outside Prairie Township, stopping in a loop downtown. Ours is going to be a little bit different, and I'll explain later on. And finally, the Northwest BRT. And this one I'm going to be changing up the most. Currently the plan is to run along Allegheny Road for most of the route, but in game you'll see an existing cargo right-of-way that I want to use instead. But it will follow a very similar path and very similar stations. This is a map of all existing cargo right-of-ways passing through Columbus. And now I want to compare this to the proposed routes by all aboard Ohio. The first one going from Cleveland to Dayton. I think it's going to be using one of these northern lines, and then heading out on one of these southwest lines. And then the Midwest Connect is most likely going to be taking this northwest line, cutting through Columbus, and heading out into the east on this line. With all of that, I think we got a pretty good background. Now let's hop into Subway Builder and see what we can make happen. If you're new to this game, what it does is it accurately predicts commutes based on where people live and where people work. And this is done by using real US Census data. And simply, the goal of the game is to connect those two. And we can see those stats by going into demand stats here. Now, Columbus is a bit of a sparse map. In real life, the population is about 2 million, but in this game, it does underestimate the population as really an average daily commuter. And every day is actually 1 year, according to the game's ridership and finances calculations. So what I like to do is first get an overall picture of where people are living. I can see South Columbus is pretty sparse, downtown is a little bit more populated, as well as the area around Ohio State. And then I'm going to go into workers and see where people are working. Now looking at the full map, I can see most of the job centers are going to be around OSU and around the downtown. Let's go a little bit more into detail for these job centers. Most notably, we have the State House right smack dab in the middle. We have the Arena District, where we have an NHL team and an MLS team. And another notable one is Columbus Community College over here, which technically sees the most workers downtown. And rapid fire, I'm going to go around the map and show off other notable job centers. In the north, we have OSU. Between these two dots, we have 60,000 workers in this area. Now, there are workers on the west side of campus, but this game has clustered it over on the east side. And then near the campus, we also have a hospital. Looking in the east, we have Columbus International, and then a little north of that, we have Easton, which is a shopping, medical, and logistics center. Now, in the very north, we have the French Quarter, and we have the Polaris Mall. And the last notable job center is Dublin, where there are a ton of offices over here in the northwest corner. So now I have a good idea of where people are living and where people are working. But if you want to get a little more detailed, what you can do is you can go to any demand bubble and click on it, and it will show you exactly where people are commuting from. It will also show you what time they're commuting and their income stats. Now I want to get a good idea of everyone traveling to OSU. So what I can do is I can use the marquee tool and select all the demand bubbles in that area, and it will give me an idea of where everyone is traveling from. This is best used in a dense area like a downtown, where you have multiple smaller bubbles, but you know you will send a ton of lines to. So let's highlight downtown and just get a good idea, and we can see there's notably a north-south cluster as well as an east-west cluster. So I think I have enough data and background to make some routes. So let me start building and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, I've built out some routes, and these are based off the East Main, the West Broad, and the Northwest BRT projects, as well as a high street line I've been seeing in a lot of Columbus fantasy rail maps. And the fifth route is an extension to the airport from downtown. I've managed to fit 37 stations, all using light metro and a mix of at-grade, elevated, and cut and cover elevations. Now let's go into our construction tab and see how much this is going to cost. This is going to cost $2.91 billion. Now, like I said, this is using light metro, which is based off Montreal's light metro trains. So I'm going to hit build, and then I'll get the routes in and we can go over in more detail these stations and what these routes are doing. Okay, I have our 3 routes in. It's really 4, but the spur to Buckeye Stadium is going to count as a Buckeye line. First, let's go over our crosstown route. Our stations include Reynoldsburg, Whitehall, Eastmore, Capital University, South of Main, Old Town East, State House, Arena District, Grandview Yard, 5th by Northwest, Carmenton, and Ohio Health Riverside Hospital. Our broad line includes Ohio Health Doctors, Casino, Westgate, Departments, Franklinton, Scioto Peninsula, State House, Discovery District, Near East Side, Franklin Park, Bexley, Broad and James, Columbus International Airport. And our final line, the Buckeye, includes Thurman, Brewery District, State House, Convention Center, Short North, 5th Avenue, OSU, Ohio Stadium, Old North, Clintonville, Beachwald, and Worthington. Now we're going to be simulating the whole first day, and I'll be changing up the trains as we go along, and I'll show you at the end what our service frequencies will be like. And if you play Subway Builder and you notice that all of these fonts are a lot larger than usual, I've downloaded the Dots mod by Naz, which lets you change any of the size of transfer dots or any of the text size or the bubble size. And I mentioned before I have been using different elevations. So realistically, if you're using a right-of-way in the median, you could just use the median as your change of elevation. In this game, that's not a possibility, as you will be intersecting with the road. So in a couple spots, I had to do a little bit of wonkiness to get underneath to get to the cut and cover height. Some of them aren't noticeable, like over here or even over here, but then there's little spots like this where you can see a little kink so I could get above the road. So any of these stations in the circle are going to be underground. Okay, with all of that out of the way, let's simulate a full day and see our ridership. So end of day 1, we peaked around 27,000 people, which was about 3% transit usage. Now let's compare our mode share with some of the highest ridership cities in the US. So we're actually at the bottom of this list at 59 with 3%, right underneath San Juan, Puerto Rico. Now this list is a mix of bus, rail, and ferries and other transportation modes. And as well as this is city proper limits, I believe, but it gives us a rough idea of where we land. Looking at routes, our broad line hit 30,000, our Buckeye hit 23,000, our Crosstown hit 15,000, and our Stadium Spur hit 4,000. Now you might be wondering why this ridership is going to be higher than our demand, and that's because we have to factor in transfers. And we can look at that by going to station ridership, and we have 2 options. We have OND, which is origin and destination, so basically where people are getting on and where people are getting off. We can look at that first. It's pretty even. OSU is by far our most used OND station at 14,000, and then the airport in second. And then looking at transfers, our State House has been allowing for lots of transfers. And that's because we have 3 different lines coming in here. So basically lets you get anywhere along one of these routes. And it looks like we also have some transfers at Arena District and Convention Center, and that's denoted by this little transfer symbol. Because these are within 10 minutes walking distance, people will consider changing lines right here. Looking at finances, I've set our fare at $425, and today we made $77 million in total revenue and $27 in total expenses, which gives us a profit of $50.3 million. If you're sitting there thinking public transportation isn't profitable, you're usually right, at least in the US. But this game has a pretty simple financial system. There's no subsidies, grants, or tax funding, so fare revenue will end up a little bit inflated, but that's really what makes it possible to keep building out new lines. And as of right now, the only real cost is just running the trains. There's no track or station maintenance, at least not yet. I think we covered the map pretty well. Most notably, I'm going to be working on this northwest extension to Dublin, and then I think I need to run a line over here to Easton. This challenge is 125 days. I'm only going to be checking in on any major projects, and then we'll have the big reveal at the end. I'll go over all of our new lines, any new stations, and look at our final ridership tallies. Jumping to day 13, and I have 3 new projects to show you. We finish off this extension to Dublin on our crosstown line. Let's look at the 3 stations I added. First one is Riverside, next one is Bridge Park, and lastly Metro Center. So I did have to condense some of those proposed BRT stations over here into these 4 stations. And now let's look at the OSU loop, which I decided to connect that spur over here to 5th by Northwest. And now we have a loop in the clockwise and the counterclockwise direction. And as well as it makes a nice O for OSU. And lastly, you must be wondering what this green line is. So this is our green line. And I noticed that there was a railway over here. So on Google Maps, I was looking into it. It's an abandoned railroad right-of-way, which is going to be turned into the Green Line Park, or the Linden Green Line. So I decided I would just use it for a light metro line. And let's look through those stations real quick. It has a transfer at State House and Discovery District. And then we have Devon Triangle, South Linden, Linden, North Linden, Hyde Park. Over on the spur we have Easton, and that's the green E. So we're sending 1 train here a day. And then up here we have Minerva Park. Looking at demand stats, we are peaking at 4% now. So we've added a percent with these projects, and that would hypothetically bump our spot up to 57th above our neighboring city of Cincinnati and right underneath New Orleans. And finances wise, I've set our fare to $475. I managed to secure the $500 million bond because we are making over $100 million in revenue, and we're making $73 million in operational profit. And looking at raw ridership, they're doing pretty good. 14,000 combined here, and then about 8,000 combined for our loop. My plan is to send the green line somewhere south into southwest Columbus over here. So that's been the check-in for, I guess, around day 10. I'll see you guys around day 50. Okay, day 50 check. We have 5 new routes and a ton of new stations, almost double what we had previously. Let's quickly go through all the changes and then we can see our current ridership numbers. Our crosstown now goes straight through Olentangy up to Powell. Our green line goes from Minerva Park to Grove City. And the green extension goes from Sunbury to Minerva Park. Our western line spans from Metro Center to Ohio Health, bridging this area with 2 big transfer stations. Our arch line runs from Preserve South through the airport, through OSU, and then up to Metro Center in Dublin. And our star line goes from Metro Center all the way to Tussing in the southeast. I try to name all the routes based off imagery and symbolism I found online. I'm not familiar at all with Columbus, so I tried my best, as well as all the station names I was just using either in-game data or the neighborhood names I could find on Google Maps. Looking at demand, we've hit 100,000 transit riders, and we're peaking at 12% transit usage. And that's going to shoot us up right above Alameda, California, and right underneath Daly City, California. Routes wise, our Star and our Buckeye line atop the list, while our OSU loop is lagging behind. And in reality, this OSU line would really be some kind of tram route. Station wise, I've been focusing on making nice transfer stations on the outside. Our State House is now at 63,000. I will be showing the full station list at the end of the episode. Financially, we're at $475 fair price. I've been using these $1 billion bonds to help fund our construction costs. We're sitting at 70% operational profit, a little bit higher than I thought I could achieve at this point. At the start of day 50, I did have a $2 billion project, so our revenue has jumped up almost 80 million, and our operational profit is sitting at 230 million. And if you're interested, here are some all-time numbers. And you can see every 10 days about I'm making these big purchases. And yes, day 50, I spent 1.92 billion in construction costs. This is gonna be the last check-in until day 125. I think this is a realistic system that could be implemented. I've tried to focus on right-of-ways and major avenues where there would be enough space to implement light rail. I think at this point, I'm gonna need to start making some unrealistic routes. But I think we got pretty far and we did a pretty good job of what I would deem a realistic build of Columbus. So with that being said, I'll see you at day 125. Day 125, this is what I have built. I have completely transformed Columbus into the metro capital of the world. We've added 11 new routes, over 150 stations, and a ton of extensions to our lines. Before we check ridership, let's check out the new routes. We have the C&D and the Midwest Connect acting as our Amtrak routes. We have the Northern running from East Westerville to OSU and then up to Old Sawmill. We have the Scioto line running from Polaris Mall all the way to Hawthorne Woods. We have the Albany line running from New Albany to South Bannon. The Delaware line running from Polaris Mall to Troy Farms. The Arlington line also running from Polaris Mall to the Discovery District. The Indianola line running from Innis Gardens to OSU and then down to Juneau. The Southern line running from Cross Creek to Far Souther. The Spanish line running from Cherry Creek to Shake Shack. And finally, if we couldn't get any more absurd, we have the 270 clockwise and the 270 counterclockwise. And what I did is I just converted this highway that loops around Columbus with a rail line and then added transfer stations for every single line, even when it probably doesn't make too much sense, like these two stations. I've demolished hundreds of homes to build out this system, and I'm pretty happy with it. So for the challenge, we're gonna simulate a full day. I've dropped our fare down to 175. I've done some testing and we should break even at this price. And once we're done simulating, we'll go through demand stats, route ridership, station ridership, our financials, and anything else I missed. So let's get it started. All wrapped up, we peaked at 308,000 or 34.3% transit usage. I did not think I was going to be able to break 25%, nonetheless 30% on this map in 125 days. I'm really happy with the result. I did have to create a pretty ugly system, if I'm going to be honest. It kind of works. There's definitely a ton of flaws. Don't love the routing in some areas. Some stations aren't getting any usage, but oh well. And that means that Columbus would have the third highest transit ridership in the nation, up there with New York, New Jersey, and beating Washington, Boston, San Francisco. We made the city a true foamer's dream. So we just used a $1.75 fare, but if you're interested, when I used a $3 fare on the same day, we got to 31.4%. And when I used a $2 fare, we got to 33.9% transit usage. And using a $4.50 fare, I was hitting around like a 29% transit usage. So you don't always need to drop your fares to get ridership. We've covered the map pretty well in blues and purples. There's definitely some areas that are red and they just have kind of funny commutes that you're not really going to build lines for. And that's what I found to be a constant in Columbus. And that's why I started making a lot of these crosstown routes. There were many commutes that driving was just going to be much quicker no matter what kind of routing I did. But 31% is great to see. Let's go to route ridership. Our Buckeye tops the list, and that's going all the way up here to this lake up here. And our Star is our second. Remember, that one's going from here all the way up here through our airport, and it's crossing over all of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This basically interacts with almost every line on our system. Our 270 line is really our third most used line if you add them up. And this idea I just had at the very end. I had an extra $3 billion and I wanted some way to connect all the lines together in one. And it worked pretty well. I liked reusing the highway. It's a good idea and it gave me an idea for a future video that hopefully you'll see soon. And yeah, besides that, all of our lines did pretty well. Even our Amtrak lines were getting some usage, even if they were just symbolic. And I have parentheses Chicago, and I have parentheses Pittsburgh, where they're supposed to be headed. Station wise, our State House broke 100,000 and our OSU was second with 55,000. Our State House was doing pretty well. I kept adding lines to it and I think it has, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines going through it. Tons of ridership there. And looking at transfers, you can see all around this highway. I had to remake basically all these stations, and that's why there's a bit of wonkiness going in, because there's no easy way to upgrade the rails yet. So I just built a station next to it and then slapped it in over top. And you can see most of our top transfer stations are with our 270 lines. And our least used station was, let's see, our Italian Village station on our Indianola line, which is right here. And yeah, that makes sense. There's not much demand in this area. And before we end the video, let's look at some key job centers and see how we did. Columbus International, we got to 62% transit usage. Half of our OSU bubble got to 42%, and the other half got to 66%. Downtown, I'm not going to click on all these, but I think we did pretty well turning them all purple. And Easton, I struggled quite a bit in, and that's why I've added so many lines and stations over here, and it seems like we did a good job here. And then Polaris Small ended at 40%. Okay, that's not too bad. It was a tough place to get people. And really the only job center I missed was down here. It's all this industry, all these warehouses down here. I honestly didn't even see this until like day 100. So poor planning on my part. For finances, let's go to all time. We maintained a 63% profit margin, making $29 billion in profit. All of that going back into construction and train purchases. On the last day, we did make $1 profit, so this does complete the challenge. And you can see on day 124, I tested a $7 fare and I managed to make $509 million in profit. But that is completely overcharging our customers. So I think that $4.50 fare is a good amount. Even on my test, $2 to $3, we're still making a healthy amount of profit. Here's our expense breakdowns. We spent the most in construction actually on day 120, and that was a $3.5 billion project. And that was to turn the highway into that loop route. And special thanks to Not License 14, who was able to get all the B-roll footage you saw in this video today. He took time out of his week to go and shoot some clips for me, and I just want to thank him again so much. It helped out the video a ton. So what do you think of our Columbus build? I did have a lot of fun, especially the first part where I was focusing on realism was a ton of fun to incorporate existing ideas, existing proposals into a real system. And even later on when it got ugly and messy, it was still pretty fun to come up with line ideas. I hope this serves as a good example of how to build a good system on a smaller map, focusing on elevated rails, light metro stations, and very key corridors. If you want to check out this map for yourself, the download link will be in the description. And if you liked this video and made it this far, consider subscribing. This video took me a long time not just to build, but to edit. With all that being said, I hope you have a good one, and bye-bye.